The last video that I did was a video diary of a painting in progress, my second of the year. And when I was putting it together, it occurred to me that it had been quite a while since I did an experimental exhibition in my front lounge way back in June 2020. Because people can't really go out to exhibitions and similar things just yet, I thought maybe it was a good time to dig out a few of my other pieces of work. This is my second exhibition in the lounge. Why don't we get started? Quite literally starting small. This painting is 8 by 10 inches. It is not particularly sophisticated in the sense that it is just on mount board. It's not on canvas or anything of that kind. I wanted to do a painting and that was the nearest surface to hand. The trick that I find with painting acrylics is to put in the background colour and then add the details later. It is much easier to build up the tones that way. I think a lot of people do something similar. The logical thing to do in this case was to begin with the sky and then the shaded bits of the tree. They were the first bits that I worked on. And then I put in the base colour for the building, and the resulting piece of work came from mixing different lighter tones of brown and red brick colours and the greens of the tree to try to make it look like the sun was shining down through the leaves and onto the roof tiles. You might think that this actually is quite a pretty picture. This is a bit chocolate box maybe. How much of it is actually artistic license? Not all that much. This is a real post office building at Newborough near Ormskirk in Lancashire. The real building really does have the hanging baskets and the post box and the little shop signs. I think it must be 17th century from what I've been able to find out. The village website tells me it dates from the 1600s. It used to be the Horse and Jockey pub, so it's quite an interesting building to turn into a post office. It really isn't very big at all. Even more specifically, just above the post office box thing on the corner where you can see the street sign, there's also a tiny little blob of green because it's one of those conservation area plaques. As soon as I saw that on the source picture that I used, I thought I've got to include that. It's historical, it should be included. That was one of the little bits that went in to finish it off. And actually all those little tiny finishing extra bits, the plants and the signs and post office box, they were all added at the last minute. It was very, very plain up until that point. I think it's quite a pretty view. It's one that always strikes me every time I go past it. I quite like to be able to share this thing that I often get just a fleeting glance of when I happen to drive in that direction. Sometimes I forget that it's over 10 years since I got back into acrylic painting. I had a bit of a go with it at sixth form and then I set it aside till probably around autumn 2010. At that point I had been doing textile based art. I've been trying to sell my work at craft fairs and I came to the conclusion that at that point it just was not enough to generate a regular income. So I started job hunting with every intention of doing something else. At the time I thought that painting would pass a bit of time and give me something to do while I looked for a job. And it was that November that I went to Rufford Old Hall for a local history day. I was helping out with the Family History Society for an open day. I was walking around the grounds that morning. It was November day, so it's low sunshine first thing in the morning, and took this photo of the hall. When I was still looking for something to do the following August, I decided that I would paint it. By then I'd got quite into doing these acrylics. Now looking back, as you do, 10 years on, I would say this view, I wouldn't say it was perfect. Apart from anything else, the roof is most definitely not level. Architecturally, there are things that aren't great about it. On the other hand, there are an awful lot of things about it that I do like. The windows in the Great Hall, I think there's just a feeling of being able to imagine the sun shining through from the far side of the building, through the windows on the far side, and casting reflections that you can see through the windows on the near side. The light on the path. It had been raining that morning, so I was trying to get that into the scene. The weird curly shrubbery is just great. That really does exist. The tree is not the best looking tree in the world, the orange leafed one on the right hand side. I do really like the sunlight on it, and on the grass it's got that really sort of late autumn morning feeling. It may not be totally perfect, but for the stage I was at the time, I think it's pretty good actually. This view of Burscough Wharf on the Leeds and Liverpool Canal in West Lancashire was painted in no more than 4 or 5 hours between the 3rd and 6th of February 2014. It's quite frightening to think that it's 7 years old. But at the time I had an exhibition coming up and I wanted to replace a similar view, a painting that I actually much preferred to this one, if I'm completely honest, which I had loaned out to somebody at the time and have never been able to trace since. I really don't know what's happened to it. I hope it's out there somewhere. I hope somebody's enjoying it, but I certainly don't know where it is. But enough of that. Burscough Wharf, as you might guess, is right by the Leeds and Liverpool Canal. The source photograph for this painting was taken standing on the canal bridge looking down the water. Historically, the building was actually a veterinary centre for the horses that used to lead the canal barges. These days it's got a completely different purpose. It is now a place of restaurants, it's got a music school, there's various independent shops, there's a sewing and alterations business. It's got a completely new lease of life for the 21st century, and it's great that it is still existing as a historical building with a totally new purpose. Visually, the real life scene does make a fantastic picture. It's an amazing view over that bridge. But in retrospect, I do wish that I'd taken a little bit more time over this. It was done in a hurry for a reason, because I wanted something to put in the forthcoming exhibition. But I think if I was to paint this again now, I would definitely do something about the shading and the perspective of the path on the right. The blue canal barge that you can see on the right is probably a little bit shorter than it should be. The shape doesn't look quite right to me now. I would also give the building some more defined roof tiles. It's a bit flat. On the other hand, painting is something of a skill that you develop over time. And I suppose really this does reflect where I was at in 2014. So for that reason I like it. And the other reason I like it is that the direction of the water really does draw your eye down further into the pictures. That wasn't something I particularly focused on when I came to paint it at the time, but looking back now, that is one of the things that strikes me about it the most. I really love the reflection of it. I think it does reflect the sky. Really, to say it's 7 years old, it's not all that bad. If you've seen my family history videos, you will doubtless know that I've found a few Catholic ancestors in my own family tree, quite a few of them out there on the paternal line. This painting of St Anne's Catholic Church in Ormskirk is the point where art and family history collide, because let's face it, why not paint something with a family connection? It just brings things to life that little bit more. Saying that, Many of my 18th century relatives wouldn't actually recognise this church because it was only opened in 1850 and it replaced the much older St Oswald's Chapel, which had existed for some time before and which my 18th century ancestors would certainly have attended. This painting wasn't begun until 164 years later, in November 2014. What a weird thought. What's even more weird is that this painting was not actually finished until the following January. So I think the moral of this story is probably do not start a painting just before Christmas because you won't finish it. Now the source picture that I chose for this was again something that I'd taken myself. It's just a picture that I got on the 28th of September 2011. It was early evening, it was autumn, so the sunlight was catching the leaves, and it's just at that point where the colours of the leaves are changing. The painting ended up with these amazing autumn tones. All the yellows were catching the sunlight and the leaves are falling into the grass. Got the little bits of yellow here and there, and of course they're clustering together around the edges of the grass because that's what autumn leaves are destined to do. Although there are areas that are definitely very dark on the building, particularly the right hand side of it, I think that it does reflect the view that I was seeing in front of me when I took the picture. Unbelievably, it took 9 hours and 5 minutes to completely finish this painting, start to finish. Of those 9 hours and 5 minutes, 4 of them actually went into getting the base colours blocked in. So before I'd even done anything else, you've got to get the base in, otherwise you end up with little tiny white bits showing through. To get rid of those, just get all the colours in and then work it up in layers. That was what I did, and this is how it was built up from there onwards. So you really do have to layer up and up and up with acrylics. I certainly remember doing that with the big tree on the right hand side of the picture. Overall, I like this. It does give you that peaceful sense of just walking around a graveyard on a quiet autumn evening. The atmosphere, I think, suits the building and the whole reason why it's there and the whole reason why the graveyard's there. Sometimes I can spend ages on a painting and never get it to look quite right. Other times you just, without trying, get something that you really, really like. I love this painting, even if I say it myself. A scene from the Leeds-Liverpool Canal. It was taken on the towpath near Halsall in Ormskirk. The building nearest the bridge that you can see in the distance is the Saracen's Head pub, if you want a geographical reference. It's a fantastically sunny August evening. The sunlight was making the place look fantastic and I got some wonderful photos that night. But if you were to ask me what I actually remember about painting this piece of work, freezing cold garage. Because I actually painted the picture the following February, between the 2nd and 3rd of February 2012. Why was I in the garage? At the time, we were having new carpets fitted, so I was simply trying to stay out of the way, and I thought the garage would be a great place to just get on with the painting. It was so incredibly cold. Fortunately, this painting has a much warmer tone. It is not the most sophisticated picture that I've ever done. This is not on stretched canvas, it's not on mount board, it's actually just very thin mount card. It has bent a little bit over time, it's just not a very sturdy surface. So if I regret anything about this painting, it's that I didn't pick a better surface to work on, but I do still love the view. A lot of it involved mixing different tones of green and layering them up to make the towpath look flat. and then the grasses on the left hand side needed to look a bit longer. So it's just about creating different effects. The tiny bits of colour that you can see, the few pink flowers on the bank on the right hand side as you're looking at the picture, they were actually added in the last couple of hours. Before that it was really, really blue and green, and I just felt it needed a little something to lift it a bit, and just by putting those bits of extra colour in, that was the thing that fixed it. I would never have guessed that it was going to have that sort of effect. If I was to change anything about it now, I might perhaps put some windows on some of the buildings in the background. I might maybe put something like a date stone on it, just a bit of interest as a composition if we want to be artistic about these things. I love this painting. What I'm most proud of is the evening sunlight effect. I don't know whether I could ever reproduce again, but I would love to have a go at it. For my final piece in this virtual exhibition, I thought I'd choose the odd painting out. I've got an awful lot of pictures that are based on Lancashire scenes, but this one most definitely isn't. This is the view towards the Church of St Mary the Virgin at Bottisford in Leicestershire, not far from the border with Lincolnshire. It's not too far from Grantham either. It is significant to my family because there are 151 baptisms, marriages and burials relating to my direct ancestors and other distant cousins that I know took place at this church in this picture. That's why I'm interested in it, and it is such a pretty view apart from anything else. Parish registers tell me that my 3 times great-grandparents, 4 times great-grandparents and 5 times great-grandparents on my Branston side, on my maternal line, are buried there. Most of them were farm labourers, so I don't know that they've got any gravestones. I know they're in the burial registers, but I never did find an actual memorial as such to them. Farm labourers they may be, but they are in quite a noble company, because inside this church there are several Earls of Rutland buried. When the Earls were then upgraded and became Dukes, they decided that they would have a mausoleum built at Belvoir Castle in their ancestral home. They stopped being buried at St Mary the Virgin, but it's nice to think that my ancestors are in quite illustrious company there. There's this brilliant river just come into the view here, which just makes the picture, I think, that and the curve of the railing going round the path. The river's name is actually spelt Devon as in the county, but it's pronounced Devon. It's one of those interesting British river names that aren't said quite how they first appear to be, but isn't that always the way with British place names? On balance, it's fair to say this is quite a green picture if we're looking at it artistically. It's something that I worked on between the 23rd of May, when I did most of the background work, and the 28th of May 2012. It is incredibly 9 years since I painted this. The original source picture was a chance snapshot that I took in May 2005. I just happened to go to Bottisford because there was a family connection. I just happened to snap this picture with my tiny little digital camera that I had at the time, and from there I just happened to get an in focus picture, and it was good enough to inspire this painting. I love the light and the shade in this, and most of all, yeah, I love the angle of the railings. It isn't totally perfect now that I look at it. I adore this picture, I really do, and I don't say that lightly. But now that I look back with a slightly more critical eye, I have realised that the tower of the church is a little bit wider on the right than it should be. It has a notable bump coming out to the right hand side, which doesn't exist on the real building. if I was to do it again, I might possibly try to improve the trees on the right side of the church because they are a bit blurry and not especially defined. I think they could do with a little bit more definition. As a view, however, I think it's great. Like the Burscough Wharf picture, it does draw your eye down the path. You sort of want to know where the path is going, and on the other hand you also want to know where the river is going, so it's a fantastic angle. And if I ever get to Bottisford again, hopefully I will one day, I'm going to see if I can replicate this picture, but I'll need a nice day to do it. It won't work otherwise. Now, of course, this being YouTube, I can't really finish off without saying if I'm put on a virtual exhibition, I would absolutely love to know which painting you like best. These are not my latest works by any means, but they are part of my collection, so I am loving the opportunity to share them with an audience, and I'd love to know what you think. So please leave me a comment if there's something that catches your eye. And thanks for watching.